Previously on Kaiserredux. So it's time we ditch them and crown our claimant instead. The commune at this point was finished, and after some bitter resistance from the traders, they capitulated. Now that the reconstruction efforts had been completed, we can now refocus again on international affairs, as we still have some undone business in the east. The filthy Boches. Yes, I know some people corrected me about the pronunciation on the past video, but since it's French, I don't really care. So, are and will always be the enemies of the French people. There was never a path for reconciliation. Now, there's only war. We can't also forget that it was the very same Boche that stole our great colonial empire. But now, we are strong enough to enforce our rightful claims. And finally, what everyone was fearing, it's time for a new all-size ultimatum. Should the Boches ignore our demands, they will have to face the new Grand Armée. And I also know I'm probably butchering the pronunciation there, and again, I don't care. Predictably, the Germans said no. It is clear that they have plunged Europe in flames again. So, it's time for the French nation to take up arms again, for we will destroy the Boches once and for all. As the Boches were tangled up in colonial conflicts over the Far East, they left their guard down, and now it's time for the French army to cross over the border into the Rhine and take what's rightful French clay. Now we are at war with our enemies, it's only natural that the British would support our claims. But instead, we were faced with betrayal, as they refused to help our efforts. It was this that showed the perfidious Albion's true colors. But we will deal with the British later, as we still have a war with the Germans. That they have now finally showed up to confront our troops. Unluckily for them, we had already crossed the Rhine, and now there was no stopping the French offensive. But just as things were going well, the damn Italians thought it was a good idea to declare on our puppet, meaning we now had a three-way conflict as the Spanish to join in as well. Thankfully we saw this coming, so we were able to continue our push in Germany. The Boches were being pushed farther and farther into the east, and so with the veteran tanks commanded by Mr. de Gaulle, the Germans were cut in two by reaching the Bohemian border. Now stuck without the supplies, the troops in Munich were destroyed, freeing the rest of our forces to end the final stretch to Berlin. and it appears that the fall of Hamburg was enough to push the Boches to the negotiating table, as they could no longer fight off our forces, and immediately surrendered even before we could take Berlin ourselves. They said Germany could never be bested. We were humiliated and defeated horribly after the Weltkrieg, and then further laughed at once we were out of France proper. France's fury has been built up for the very moment that was the invasion of Germany, which saw the French army strike Germany with all it had. The Germans fought on the hills, on the Rhine, the streets, and the forest, but as the war progressed, the scales tipped for France. And these scales continued to tip as the French troops arrived in Berlin, razing of Berlin, the destruction of so much German heritage. It may have been a tragedy to see so much German architecture wrecked, but it was in return for the pain and misery caused upon France. The Empire's banner flies all over Germany, and in Germany extra garrisons are found, due to the furious German resistance. But we have pushed Germany out of their place in their sun, equals or none. With the new government fleeing to the colonies, they have opened peace talks as well. They offered our former colonies exchange for letting them leave. In this case, fighting the colonial troops would be a nightmare as the army is now exhausted, so we will have peace for now. But at some point, we will finish them one day. With the surrender of the main forces in Europe, Berlin fell, and that marked the end of the Hunnic beast. Not only that, but also meant our glorious Alsace-Lorraine was finally French again. We had avenged the soldiers of 1870 and 1914. The horrible name of Strasbourg will no longer be necessary. Already our magnificent Strasbourg has found its name. Wait, it says the Starsburg there in that event. Okay, I guess it's Starsburg now. The city of stars, I guess. I don't know. The hero of Verdun did not fight in vain. Now we could focus on the Italo-Spanish alliance and teach them a lesson for their insolence. With the fall of Rome, our enemies were on the brink of collapse, but it also paved the way for a new question: should we strive forward for the greater France? With the recent military successes, our military high command are confident enough that we can push for greater glories. After all, who would be able to stop us? But that question also comes bundled up with another one, and that is the matter of the Entente Alliance. It was clear that the idea of an alliance with the English was just as a contention of the Hunnic beast and the Khmer menace, but now that both are gone, our centuries-long rivalry can continue, for we will meet the British on the battlefield at some point. Anyway, the Italians surrendered, the Spanish were now on borrowed time, and after the collapse of most of their troops in the Pyrenees, they were out of the war. Now gone, a new continental hegemon had arisen. We could now have our way with Europe and revive the idea of pushing for the natural borders of France as the rightful way France should be. With everything done, we could get back into the realm of politics, but that means dealing with the young patriots and their crazy ideas As such, our brave emperor could no longer sit idly as his own people suffered. It was time to take action. It was time to take down his own government. The emperor had summoned General Girard to order the arrest of his own government. He pleaded to be right in the front and center of the action, but the generals would not budge, so he had to sit out as the gunfire rang through Paris. As Napoleon tried to reach a nearby station, a bunch of officers came out of the tunnels to inform the emperor of his glorious victory over the young patriots, and he was now free to address his own people and form a new liberal government per his wishes. Rejoice, good people of France! Rejoice! For your emperor has vanquished the corrupt menace which held that murder and governance were equal. With Napoleon the VI finally unbound of the so-called patriotic chains, he can restore peace and justice to his empire. Now that the young patriots are no longer in power and we have a provisional government in charge, we can start to move into a proper democratic system by making peace with the moderate left and promoting proper patriotism, as we're all Frenchmen despite what the young patriots claim of racial purity. Though our government is now left-leaning oriented, that doesn't mean that the right is gone. Francois Coty, I don't care the pronunciation, has reorganized the right into a new imperial party to fill the void the young patriots left after their arrest, uniting most of the right political spectrum seeking old imperial glories. While the heads of the young patriots are gone, their minions are still causing out their trouble. We must get rid of them if we are to move out from this dark part of our history. We must also support many of the liberals that were punished under the young patriots as we move to install a new democratic rebirth. And so, with all the preparations ready, it's time for the first elections in years with both the Imperial Democratic Socialist Party and the Imperial Party, one seeking welfare and peace, while the other looking to regain such of the old glories under our first emperor. With many now convinced, thanks to our military victories, the Imperial Party has won in a landslide, and now the plan to create an empire worthy of the first Napoleon is now in motion. And the funny thing is that the first focus of this warpath was to take Germany down, but we already have done that, so skipping that part, since we already got ahead of that, we are now able to turn many of our puppets into special client states. Also, finishing the focus triggers a new faction, but it tends to crash the game. As you can see here, it did 2 times, but after some tinkering around, I finally got it to not crash, and now because of our aggressive wars, the 8th coalition has formed, bringing the Russians and Austrians on the British side, just like the good old days. It's time we show Albion that we are ready to tear this pitiful coalition down, just like how the great Napoleon did 5 times. But first, let me restore the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, as the focus tree allows you to do that, just to spite the Russians and the Austrians. With everything ready, it's time we end the centuries-old rivalry between Albion and the Great France. For today, we destroy the lingering threat across the Isles. For today, we sail for London, men. As the drums of war have announced, war has started. Thousands of soldiers have crossed the channel, as well as crossing the US border from Mexico, as the Pacific states have joined the British in their most desperate hour. As nations continue to join the war, it has begun to escalate. As the Austrians and Russians started to mobilize, we know we have to move fast, so Our Imperial army took the British Isles in record speed, forcing the king to retreat back over the Atlantic Ocean, finally doing what the great Napoleon I couldn't. They said Britain would never be triumphed over. The home isles are now under the French jackboot, much to the displeasure of the British. An autonomous government has been established, ruling from London, and the regional provisions are in Edinburgh and Cardiff for Scotland and Wales respectively. British resistance cliques are already established and hold a few towns and cities, but French detachments are en route to these establishments to punish them. Under the shadow of Britain, France has now come out from under that shadow. Burn them! And so, the month-long campaigns to take the Austrians and Russians began. Thankfully for us, the Russians were extremely weak thanks to their earlier civil war, and the Austrians, still divided as ever, proved to be a weak target. The Americans, fighting in Asia, left their borders open, so overall we had a really good position. Other British allies, such as the Portuguese and Dutch, were also defeated, closing any opportunity in Western Europe for the 8th Coalition to threaten the French heartland. Oh, I also turned Italy and England into special puppets to send the word that France had finally triumphed over England. The Austrians collapsed. The Americans were being pushed ever more eastward, casualties rising through the roof. This war was truly worth being called a proper coalition war. But you know, there is no Kaiserredux video without the mandatory bug. So because we were fighting the Pacific states and Mexico was at war with them as well, they actually have an event where they can piece out the Pacific states if Mexico takes California when they intervene in the Second American Civil War. And guess what? Well, it triggered and left my men stuck without supplies, so I had to reload the save and annex Mexico for the meanwhile to avoid this happening again. With both Petrograd and Moscow falling to our hands, the great humiliation of Napoleon I had been reversed. Our new army was truly a homage to the Grand Armée of old. Winning engagement after engagement, I'm sure Napoleon I would be proud. With all of these victories at hand, our emperor has unveiled a new statue commemorating the Bonaparte dynasty, picturing the great Napoleon I, Napoleon III that tried recapturing his uncle's glory, and our emperor Napoleon VI. Truly a work of art made by blood, sweat and tears. But we still have a war to finish. Not being able to resist further, the Russians surrendered their forces, finally taming the bear in the east. Now, the only two major powers opposing us, the Pacific states and the Canadians, were both on their last legs, with the Americans being the ones to surrender first after the fall of their coastal cities, and Canada surrendering at last with the fall of British Columbia and Ottawa. The Entente had been defeated, or the 8th Coalition as now they were being called, and now we could have our way with the world. The Third Empire is greater than anything Napoleon I might have imagined. it exceeded his work and continues to go on even upwards, to take the mantle of the universal power around which the entire world revolves. In everything I have succeeded. Now, normally playing as Napoleon you have to go through the colonial path of eventually getting claims in the east, but since I don't want to fight the Japanese just for Vietnam, and we already control America with the help of some council commands, it was time we reclaimed the true colonies of France in North America and redraw them up with a new great piece of Montreal. But yeah, those borders are still a bit rough, so just a second.
One eternity later.
Now that's more like it. So, we have established new fonts in the Louisiana colonies while also retaking Quebec. We gave the territories back to the natives in the former 13 colonies and West Coast in British Columbia, even though for some reason one of them became Napoleonic Portugal, don't ask why. And also I gave Mexico its own land, so it could actually call itself a proper empire. And with some insight into the future, after cleaning up Europe and Africa a bit, this is the result. We have built a continental system that not only spans Europe, but 3 continents. The glory of the French people, Napoleon, and the nation itself have been restored. A new Napoleonic future awaits us, but that's for another time. And that's it for this mini-series. I hope you enjoyed the journey of going from a rump colonial government in North Africa to a proper continental hegemon under Napoleon VI. If you would like to see more content like this, remember to subscribe, as this really helps out the channel. You are dismissed, soldier.